Hey, I've been trying to labor in the Gospels as of late. I've been writing a series of pages in my notepad that deal with something I like to call From the Garden to the Wilderness, and I guess maybe back to the garden. I don't know. But the garden is something that's significant throughout the entirety of the Bible. But today I specifically want to talk about the woman Mary Magdalene, specifically, or Miriam Magdala, how she goes to the tomb. She has spices, and she's preparing to see the body of the Lord. And what's interesting to her is the fact that not only is the stone rolled away from the entrance to the tomb, but the tomb itself is empty. The garments that Jesus was wrapped in when he was buried, they're there, but they're not over a body anymore. And she encounters two men who are angels, and their clothing was gleaming like lightning. And they ask her, woman, why are you crying? Another gospel writer notates it. They ask her, why are you looking for the living amongst the dead? And then she later on, in the same moment, encounters Jesus, who she thought was the gardener, and he asked her the same thing, why are you crying? I'd say out of everything that the Lord is interested in doing in an individual's life, in your life, I think he's very intentional and concerned about our advancement. And I believe that when we are in grief, I believe it blocks our viewpoint of God, and we can't see him clearly. Because remember, she didn't realize it was Jesus. She thought he was someone else. It was the Lord himself talking to her, and she thought he was the gardener. And what's interesting is what the angels had asked her, why are you looking for the living amongst the dead, and why are you crying? What's interesting is, I feel like sometimes, and to piggyback what I brought up in another video, sometimes we encounter God in a certain way at a specific place, and we kind of just take that revelation and we just run with it forever. And as if, God never just wants to do anything new, never wants to say anything else. I think that one of the quickest ways to kill someone's fire for purpose and drive in life is to literally take God and put him in a box, because there's very few things that you can experience when you limit him in that way. And so sometimes when we encounter God in a certain specific place or area, it's like, sometimes I guess we feel like we should park there forever. But what's interesting is he says, why are you crying? There's no reason to be crying, because sometimes when we encounter God in certain places, or we might be in a place for a season, sometimes the Lord will prompt us, tell us, or sometimes we might even be able to discern it through feelings. This is kind of just right now. Get what you need for this respective season, to carry on into the next season for whatever it is that the Lord has for you. And so it's interesting, the Lord doesn't even allow Mary, in the midst of her excitement, to park here, because he wants her to go and tell the apostles, that, he's here, he's risen, and he's going to go meet them. And the interesting thing about that is, I'd say, and I kind of lost my train, but, dang it. I hate it when I do that. But sometimes when we encounter God in a specific place, it's like we know better. It's like we're just here for a specific amount of time. And what's interesting is, I believe the angels, and of course Jesus himself, tells, Mary, hey, basically, to put it in modern terms, why are you shocked? Like, this is what was written. This is what he said. He had to be betrayed. He had to be delivered over as a criminal. He had to be executed on a stake, and he had to die. He had to be buried, and he was going to rise again 3 days later. So, it's like, so why are you even here in the first place? And so I think out of everything in life, like I said, I think God is very intentional about us progressing forward. I do believe revelation is powerful, and I do think it has a capacity to change lives, but I don't think it was meant by God for us to just park in a certain area without that transforming us, and then we, going out and telling others. Because I think what's interesting is, she goes to the disciples, and, she tells them, what happened. I encountered the Lord in the garden. And disciples, they brushed it off. They thought, the scriptures literally said they thought, which they were saying, the woman was nonsense. And one thing that's interesting about the Lord and his revelation and his voice and the power of the prophetic is, when God speaks to an individual, when he talks to you, he's not always going to talk to you about stuff that you've been thinking about, or stuff that you already knew, or stuff that you've, been feeling. Your greatest revelation might be, so far, you might be like 2 + 2 is 4. So sometimes, God might walk up on you and offend you by saying, hey, 2 × 2 is also 4, or 4 ÷ 2 is 2, or 3 times 6 is 18. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I was over here fine with the 2 plus 2, but now you're telling me that there's these other numbers and these other multiplications and these other, multiple numbers that can get me here and get me there. So sometimes the word of the Lord and the revelation and encounters, it can be quite offensive, because despite what they technically knew, what they were already told over and over again, because it didn't make sense to them, they brushed it off. But I think that's very interesting. The word of the Lord is powerful, and this set them up for an encounter with him. And what's interesting is when one of the disciples, specifically Thomas, does experience Jesus, it's almost like, Jesus was like, hey man, I came back just for you. And he lets, Thomas put his hand in his side where they pierced him. So I believe that the Lord is very intentional in how he grooms us, how he prepares us for revelation, and what he intends for us to do as believers and witnesses, was preparing us for, I guess, what he has given us to share with others for their transformation. So that's what I have for you today, and I'll try to stop losing my train of thoughts. See you.